Part 9. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 81. Uncle, are you selling this little black dog? After leaving Zhang Yiding's house, Zhang Fengjai went through 2 alleys in succession, but did not find any treasures that could be used to defend against Zhu Ziqiang. However, when he went to the 3rd alley, he unexpectedly saw a dark-skinned middle-aged man in his 40s whipping a skinny little black dog with a whip, and he couldn't help but ask loudly with his eyes brightened. Sell, of course. The middle-aged black man, who had signed the demolition compensation agreement and received part of the compensation in advance and moved out within 3 days, was worrying about how to deal with the little black dog in front of him. If he threw it away directly, he was selfish and worried that someone else would pick it up and take advantage of it. If he ate it directly, the little black dog with no meat on it was not worth the effort. So, when he heard that someone was willing to spend money to buy the little black dog, the middle-aged black man quickly nodded and agreed. 50 yuan, I'll take it away if you agree. Zhang Fengjai took out a 50 yuan green note and showed an attitude that he would never raise the price. Okay. Not to mention 50 yuan, even 20 yuan is better than throwing it away directly. So, the middle-aged black man nodded and agreed, and directly reached out to grab the green note in Zhang Fengjai's hand. Then he reached out to untie the chain on the little black dog's neck and said with a smile, "Young man, this black dog belongs to you. Let's go." Seeing the fearful look in the eyes of the little black dog, and the trembling body, Zhang Fengjai knew why it was afraid of him. So, he did not reach out to pick up the little black dog, but turned around and ordered indifferently. Looking up at the owner who smiled and put away the green note and often tortured him. Turning his head to look at the young man who made him feel afraid, but saved him. In the end, the little black dog dragged his bruised body and slowly left the home where he had lived for more than 2 months. Standing on the ridge at the south end of the village, Zhang Fengjai turned around and looked at the little black dog after it stopped 2 meters away from him. "Do me a favor and I'll give you back your freedom." Woof, woof, woof. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's promise, the little black dog lowered his head and thought for a while, then raised his head and barked 3 times. "Come with me." After getting the little black dog's consent, Zhang Fengjai nodded, then stepped over the ridge and continued to stroll around Lala village. Hot. Scorching hot. Listening to the information collected by several colleagues and bodyguards, Sister Qing now has only one feeling, that is, her old face was slapped by the young man who followed Mr. Shen. Because of the 13 younger generations who can decide whether the Lin family can be demolished smoothly, except for Lin Shishun whom she just met, 3 have completely turned into fools, 2 are talking nonsense like crazy, 2 left the village overnight and disappeared, and 4 were sent to the hospital with a high fever. At this time, no matter what the result of the negotiation between Mr. Shen and Lin Jianhai is, she can use the means of intimidation to completely win over most of the Lin family members. Sister Qing, what should we do next? The people who can be sent to negotiate the demolition compensation agreement are not only the business elites specially trained by Yongsheng Group, but also the old people who have worked for several years. They also realize the opportunity to break through the final demolition of Lala village. Thinking of the funds promised by Shen Loxi, they all looked at Sister Qing excitedly, waiting for her to give the order for the final attack. In the shortest time, win over all the people of the Lin family, and strive to complete all the demolition compensation negotiations before noon, and then post all the contents of the compensation agreement after putting away the guilty thoughts. Sister Qing also gradually gave the order excitedly. When several colleagues rushed to the negotiation object, Sister Qing took a deep breath to adjust her mood, and then when she was about to take down the family of the younger generation of the Lin family who had lost their backbone, she unexpectedly saw Zhang Fengjai with his hands behind his back, looking around. Regardless of the scope of work or the level of position, Sister Qing could choose to ignore Zhang Fengjai's existence at this time and continue her own breakthrough work. but her character of saying one thing and saying two things still made her take the initiative to walk in front of Zhang Fengjai and apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry." Looking at the woman in front of him, although her appearance was not very outstanding, but her personality was straightforward, Zhang Fengjai waved his hand to indicate. "It's okay, I didn't take what happened just now to heart." Afterwards, when he directly passed Sister Ching and was about to leave, he unexpectedly saw a faint black air between her eyebrows, and the wealth palace on the bridge of her nose showed a look of losing money. According to Shen Loxi's promise, completing the demolition negotiation work ahead of time should be rewarded with a generous cash reward. Why did Sister Ching have a face of losing money and avoiding disasters? Sister Ching, wait a moment. While quickly thinking about the reason why the other party was willing to spend money to avoid disaster, Zhang Fengjai called Sister Ching. "Do you have anything else to say?" Sister Ching stopped and turned around to ask politely. "Sister Ching, maybe my next words are a bit rash, but the starting point is for your own good, I hope you don't mind." Because he was not familiar with Sister Ching, he could not guess the real reason why the other party was willing to spend money to avoid disaster. Considering that they were just colleagues and had only met twice or three times, Zhang Fengjai could only remind her as much as he could. "You say," Sister Ching nodded. "According to your face, there is a gap in the wealth palace between your nose bridge, showing a destiny of losing money and eliminating disasters, which means that you must have made a major mistake in your work just now. I hope you can carefully recall and check the entire demolition negotiation process to see if there is any disclosure in it." After leaving a kind reminder, Zhang Fengjai continued to stroll with his hands behind his back. When she heard the work mistakes mentioned in Zhang Fengjai's reminder, Sister Ching immediately showed a trace of anger on her face, because this was a denial and humiliation of her diligent work. However, thinking that Zhang Fengjai could know the situation of the younger generation of the Lin family without leaving home, she immediately calmed her anger by means of rapid breathing, and began to carefully recall the entire demolition negotiation process. Soon, she thought that Lin Shishun not only signed the demolition compensation contract with his left hand, but also did not press his fingerprint. If the entire Lala village was completely razed afterwards, and Lin Shishun suddenly changed his mind and said it was a forced demolition, it would not only put the entire group in a passive position, but also affect the process of engineering development. Thinking of this, Sister Ching's forehead immediately broke into a lot of cold sweat. If things were really as she had guessed, then with Shen Gao's personality, he would not only be criticized and fined, but would most likely be fired directly. "Thank you." After raising her head and thanking Zhang Fengjai, who had walked to the end of the alley, Sister Ching prepared a new contract for demolition compensation and then went straight to Lin Shishun's home. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 82. After hearing Sister Ching's grateful voice, Yu Heiran's eyes flashed with admiration, and then when he took a step to continue strolling, he suddenly saw a centipede over 7 inches long flashing among the pile of rocks at the head of the village. Without the slightest hesitation, the Qingfeng step with spiritual power made him appear in the pile of rocks in an instant. Then, his hands like steel quickly cleared the rubble, and finally saw the centipede desperately fleeing in the wet soil. 10-year blood centipede. When Zhang Fengjai saw the centipede crawling motionlessly in the mud, he couldn't help but take a breath. Because the centipede in front of him was not only 7 inches and 9 points long, that is, 23 centimeters, but also blood red all over. This shows that the toxins in the centipede's body have the ability to instantly take away a person's personality and hurt the internal masters. "Do me a favor and I'll give you back your freedom." Zhang Fengjai stretched out his steel-like fingers to clamp the centipede, and said it as if he was giving instructions to the little black dog. However, facing the promise given by Zhang Fengjai, the centipede suddenly raised its head in obvious disagreement, and then bit his arm fiercely. In response, Zhang Fengjai did not dodge and let the other party bite his arm. After getting up and giving instructions to the little black dog, he directly used the Qingfeng step to run straight to Zhang Yiting's house at the west end of the village. Track the breath to find me. The spiritual power combined with the Qingfeng step allowed him to return to Zhang Yiting's house in just a dozen seconds. When he saw that the big rooster thrown in the corner had not been dealt with, he rushed to the rooster with a flash of joy in his eyes, quickly dipped a drop of chicken blood on his free left hand, and then dotted it on the back of the centipede. The centipede, which was desperately trying to bite Zhang Fenjai's arm and release the highly toxic in its body, trembled a few times as if it had been struck by lightning, and then completely fainted. Chickens are yang creatures and naturally restrain insects. This is why the red-crowned rooster condensed from chicken blood can cause the blood-sucking insect to wake up and fight back. Looking at the white mark left on his arm, Zhang Fenjai took a deep breath and quickly took out a blank talisman paper from his sleeve. Then, he used his finger to lead the pen and chicken blood to lead the ink to draw a talisman. Then, using the talisman just drawn, he completely wrapped the centipede and carefully put it into his sleeve. Fortunately, Shen Loxi took Wang Denmei to Lin Jianhai's house, and Zhang Yiting accompanied Jiang's mother to clean up in the inner room. They did not find the centipede he had just caught. Otherwise, it would definitely cause waves of shock and repeated questioning. After cleaning the chicken blood on his fingers, Zhang Fenjai sat back on the stone bench, waiting for the arrival of the little black dog while overturning the means of defending against Zhu Ziqiang. Because that thousand-legged blood centipede, which is more than 10 years old, can easily kill Zhu Ziqiang if used properly, and it will not arouse any suspicion afterwards, and it may not even be contaminated with any causal relationship. Hey! Whose little black dog is this? Why is it so pitiful? Just when Zhang Fenjai was considering whether to take advantage of the removal of the soul-eating goo to directly kill Zhu Ziqiang, the evil monk, Shen Loxi's sympathetic voice suddenly came from outside the courtyard gate. Then, Shen Loxi, with a distressed face, walked into the yard with the struggling little black dog in his arms, and then complained to Zhang Fenjai. I don't know which damn bastard is so cruel that he tortured this little black dog like this. Mr. Shen, put down the little black dog. As a dog guarding the house, it has a trace of righteousness, which is also an important reason why dog blood can ward off evil and eliminate disasters. Among all dog species, the most loyal and unrebellious black dog has the strongest righteousness in its blood, which can hurt many monsters and ghosts that have not yet transformed, as well as extremely yin things. The soul-eating insect in Shen Loxi's mind is just a monster that has not yet left its mortal body. It is easily affected by the breath of the little black dog, and then instinctively enters her brain to take refuge, which will increase the difficulty of removal. Okay. Looking at the blood stains on her hands, Shen Loxi nodded and put down the little black dog, and hurried to wash it. Come here. After taking out 3 silver needles from his sleeves, Zhang Fenjai waved to the little black dog. Although the little black dog obediently followed the call and walked towards him, it suddenly stopped at a distance of 2 meters, and looked at him with fear in its eyes. Stand still. Knowing that the special breath on his body made some more psychic animals dare not approach easily, Zhang Fenjai did not force the little black dog to come to him. After that, he told the little black dog not to move around, and with the help of spiritual power, he inserted 3 silver needles into the acupuncture points on its forehead, forelimbs, and abdomen. It didn't take long for the bleeding wounds on the little black dog to scar, and the scarred wounds began to slowly grow new skin, and the originally depressed demeanor gradually became energetic. More importantly, the fear in its eyes gradually disappeared, and it was able to cross the 2-meter cordon and began to approach Zhang Fenjai. The little black dog's excellent reaction made Zhang Fenjai's eyes flash with a hint of surprise. While lowering his body to take back the 3 silver needles, he used the unique pulse-cutting technique of his grandfather to carefully check the condition of its meridians. Then, he found that the Tianchong meridian and Huizhen meridian in the little black dog's body were naturally unobstructed, which made him sigh at the fairness of heaven. Although the heaven made the little black dog born in a tortured cold-blooded family, it gave it wisdom beyond animals. If nothing unexpected happens in the future, it should be able to get rid of the mortal body and upgrade to a spirit beast. Looking up at Shen Loxi who was washing, and then looking at Zhang Yiting who started to prepare lunch, Zhang Fenjai shook his head secretly. In the end, he decided to give the little black dog to Sulitzi to take care of, so that she could get the company of the little black dog and get a blessing from heaven in the future. Go to the corner to rest first, and prepare delicious food for you later. Thinking of this, Zhang Fenjai waved to the little black dog. Zhang Fenjai, you are still smart. After washing, Shen Loxi picked up a contract for demolition compensation and said with joy in her eyes. At first, that old fox Lin Jianhai was talking nonsense to me and refused to agree to the compensation plan I proposed. But when Denmi showed up with that woman, that old fox not only signed and put his fingerprints on it obediently, but also did not put forward any additional conditions. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 83. After hearing Shen Loxi's story, Zhang Fenjai nodded without any surprise. In fact, yesterday when the woman opened the phone to view photos, he had already seen her face with the help of the light emitted by the phone. At the same time, combined with the smell of love emanating from that woman, he knew what exactly happened between Lin Jianhai and that woman. The relationship that just happened turned into a dull fool. For the shrewd Lin Jianhai, he was very aware of the risks that would come after the matter was exposed. Therefore, he must now keep Shen Loxi from handing over the woman, and then find a way to erase all traces related to him, and ensure his own safety 100% before he has time and energy to sabotage the demolition work. However, with Shen Loxi's thunderous work style and speed, by the time Lin Jianhai erased all traces that threatened his safety, the entire Lala village would have been turned into a pile of ruins. Even if Lin Jianhai had an eye for everything, he would not be able to sabotage the completed demolition work, let alone gain any benefits from it. After recounting the recent victory, Shen Loxi, who was sitting on the stone bench, looked up at Zhang Fenjai, who was performing increasingly well, with a moved look in his eyes. Rescue at the critical moment not only avoids the danger of disfigurement, but also completely suppresses the bloody conflict that may lead to death. In time, they discovered the secret collusion between Huaxi and the Kowloon group, and used thunderous means to defeat more than 50 of Huaxi and Zhu Shiqiang's men, completely shocking hundreds of villagers in Lala village. The 2 million cash extorted from Huaxi not only rescued 9 poor families in Lala village, but also enhanced the positive image of Yongsheng group, which finally allowed the demolition compensation negotiations to proceed smoothly. Basically, it can be said that Zhang Fenjai takes at least 2/3 of the credit for the successful completion of the demolition and compensation work in Lala village. Shen Loxi was deeply moved by the fact that a bodyguard who had just taken office, and a bodyguard whom he had once despised, could give without any complaints. Shen Loxi was deeply moved, and at the same time, she also planned to repay and compensate the other person. Zhang Fenjai, you have made great contributions to the successful completion of the Lala village demolition and compensation work. According to the group's rules and regulations for rewarding outstanding employees, you should receive rich rewards. Putting down the document in his hand, Shen Loxi gestured as if he was bleeding profusely. Tell me. What do you want? The sudden reward made Zhang Fenjai feel excited immediately, but the excitement cooled down instantly before it really bloomed. Because when handling the demolition compensation work in Lala village, he not only used the martial arts taught by his second grandfather, but also used the Taoist skills and spells inherited by his third grandfather. Regardless of whether Shen Loxi's reward was a house, a car, or notes, he had to donate 99% of it in the end, so he waved his hand without interest and said, No need, you should reward those employees who negotiate hard. If he willingly donated 2 million in cash, it was because the money came from an improper source and could easily lead to trouble in jail. Then, the company's rewards are not only reasonable and legal, but they are also the income of your own labor, so you can take them with peace of mind. But Zhang Fengjai refused without interest. While Shen Loxi felt very puzzled, she also became increasingly unable to see through the young man with mysterious abilities in front of her. Sister Luo 11, just now Butler Su called and said that the chairman and his wife have booked their air tickets to return to China at noon tomorrow and will be able to return to the villa at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Just when Shen Luo 11 was thinking about who Zhang Fengjai was. What kind of person is that? Wang Denmi walked to her side and reminded her after hanging up the phone. Why did you return home early? Facing Wang Denmi's reminder, Shen Loxi first asked in confusion, and then muttered to herself. Now that the biggest obstacle, Lin Jianhai, has been taken down, the remaining few shrimp soldiers and crabs will neither become a problem nor affect the demolition work. There is no need for me to continue to sit in the battle for the time being. After finishing talking to herself, Shen Loxi raised her head and gave instructions to Wang Denmi. Denmi, call Uncle Su and tell him that we will go back to the villa in the afternoon and ask him to prepare some delicious food in advance to reward us for our hard work these 2 days. Nu. After nodding in response, Wang Denmi turned around to call Su Shiqiang, while Shen Loxi turned to Zhang Fengjai and invited him. Come back to the villa with us in the afternoon and have a taste of the superb craftsmanship of the Lu family chefs. Okay. Judging from the time when Zhang Yiding and her daughter went to the Shushan Taoist temple, the third grandfather will start to remove the soul-eating goo from Jiang's mother by tomorrow evening at the latest. 10 minutes later, he had to immediately get rid of the soul-eating goo in Shen Loxi's mind. He just needed to observe the environment of the villa in advance and arrange some means to kill Zhu Ziqiang. Therefore, facing Shen Loxi's invitation, Zhang Fengjai nodded in agreement without much thought. In the following period, Zhang Yiding carefully prepared lunch, and Shen Loxi took the time to deal with the demolition work. Feeling bored, Zhang Fengjai could only return to the slope at the west end of the village and look at the Daguan village where the netherworld was. 3 foxes, 3 cats, and 3 snakes, this is the number of monsters that the giant grey rat has successfully advanced to in the land of vengeance. Based on the strength shown by the cat demon last night, if he wanted to defeat the 9-headed monster in the Venetian land, he would need to at least have the ability to break through the 7th level of chi condensation and control the means of releasing spiritual power. However, considering that the land of Leaking Yin is the lair of the 9-headed monster after all, it has the advantages of time and place. It is not enough to just break through the cultivation. Some means of restraining the evil spirit need to be prepared in advance. But when he thought that some of the things that restrain the evil spirit need to be purchased with piles of red tickets, the invisible pressure that suddenly fell on his shoulders made him feel a headache, and he had to start thinking of ways to make money. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Just when Zhang Fengjai was having a headache about how to make money, a rat's cry suddenly sounded in his ears. He quickly looked down and found that the rat's cry was the grey giant rat that he met yesterday. Squeak, squeak, squeak. After responding to the other party's greeting with the same rat's cry, Zhang Fengjai hurriedly asked the other party why he suddenly appeared. Squeak. Listening to the grey giant rat's explanation, Zhang Fengjai's eyes gradually emerged with a strong murderous aura, because the grey giant rat was forced to pass on the message to the 9-headed monster in the land of Leaking Yin. According to the grey giant rat, the 9 monsters gave him a final ultimatum. If he has not left Lala village by midnight today, then all 9 monsters will leave the place of Leaking Yin, and then use sneak attacks to hurt everyone around him, and finally join forces to take his life. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 84. Since arriving in Lala village, he has never taken the initiative to provoke the 9-headed monster in the Venetian land. But what about the other party? The cat demon, one of the 9 demons, not only took advantage of midnight to sneak attack on him, but now also dared to threaten him with the safety of Shen Loxi and Zhang Yiting. This made Zhang Fengjai really have murderous intentions, and at the same time he decided that no matter what method he used, he must earn enough to buy the things to restrain the evil aura in the shortest possible time. Brother Mouse, please go back and tell those 9-headed monsters for me that I, Zhang Fengjai, will leave Lala village soon, but when I return to Lala village, their souls will be destroyed. After replying to the threat of the 9-headed monster, Zhang Fengjai turned around and left the hillside with a gloomy face. However, when he returned to the yard of Zhang Yiting's house, he saw Shen Loxi, who was frowning, and Sister Qing, who had water in her eyes. "What's going on?" Zhang Fengjai asked with a gloomy face as he walked to the stone table. Sister Qing was deceived by Lin Shishun and signed a contract that did not have any legal effect. After handing the demolition compensation contract to Zhang Fengjai, Shen Loxi explained in a rather unhappy tone. Now, Sister Qing asked him to renew the contract for demolition compensation. Lin Shishun not only flatly refused, but also made more excessive demands. "Sister Qing, take me to see Lin Shishun." There was nowhere to vent his anger. Lin Shishun, ran into the muzzle of the gun. How could Zhang Fengjai miss the opportunity to vent his anger? Therefore, he did not accept the contract handed over by Shen Loxi, but suppressed the anger that was constantly boiling in his heart and gave instructions to Sister Qing. "I'll go too." Shen Loxi quickly dropped the documents in her hand and raised her hand excitedly. In this regard, Zhang Fengjai nodded in acquiescence without objection, and then followed Sister Qing straight to the east end of the village. Lin Shishun, who was frowning, tapped the table with the 5 fingers of his right hand and said to Xiangmei in a helpless tone, "I didn't expect that girl from the Shen family to be so thoughtful. She discovered the loopholes in the contract so quickly and made a counter-attack that I didn't expect." Xiangmei, who didn't look depressed or annoyed at all because of the failure of her plan, tried her best to suppress her inner joy and persuaded Lin Shishun. "Master, how about we continue to follow the uncle? In this case, we, the 3 of us, will not have to live in separate places with you, and the benefits of receiving demolition compensation will probably be no less than what you would have requested individually. As the saying goes, brothers fighting tigers are brothers, and fathers and sons are soldiers on the battlefield." Facing his wife Xiangmei's persuasion, Lin Shishun said even more depressed and helplessly, "Xiangmei, I don't want to completely part ways with Uncle and Zhengs. I also want to get more demolition compensation benefits from Yongsheng Group and Zhulang Group through unity and confrontation. But today is different from the past. The uncle and Zhengs underestimate the enemy and are arrogant, and the Shen family girl is shrewd and capable. It makes me worry that the method of uniting and confrontation may eventually fail, and in the end we will not get any benefits. In this case, how can I give you 3 mothers a prosperous life without worries about food and clothing?" Lin Shishun's simplest expression of love made Xiangmei walk behind him and gently rub his shoulders, while a look of disgust and anger flashed in his eyes. "Master, as long as our family can be safe and sound, it will be God's greatest favor to us. Forget it, I'd better go to the uncle's place first and see if he has any way to deal with the Shen family girl." Xiangmei's tenderness made Lin Shishun unwilling to live in separate places, and Shen Loxi's shrewdness also made him feel very afraid. Therefore, he reached out and held Xiangmei's tender hands, indicating that she did not need to continue the massage. After continuing the massage, he stood up and left the main room, walking towards Lin Jianhai's home. However, when he opened the red iron door, he unexpectedly saw Sister Qing and Shen Loxi standing outside the door, as well as the young man who made everyone in the Lin family feel fearful and fearful. Looking up at Lin Shishun, who had an honest face but was actually quite shrewd, Zhang Fengjai took the opportunity of him talking to Sister Qing and Shen Loxi to observe his face carefully. "Mr. Shen's visit really makes this humble house shine. After quickly getting rid of his surprise, Lin Shishun put a high hat on Shen Loxi's head and warmly invited everyone into the room. "Mr. Shen, this is my wife Xiangmei." After returning to the main room, Lin Shishun pointed at Xiangmei, who was clearing the table, and introduced. Then, he pointed at Shen Loxi and introduced him to his wife. "Xiangmei, this beauty is Shen Loxi, the general manager of Yongsheng Group, and the only daughter of the chairman of Yongsheng Group." Seeing Shen Loxi's stunning appearance, outstanding temperament, and famous brand clothes, a look of envy and jealousy flashed in Xiangmei's eyes. "Hello." After nodding to Xiangmei with an indifferent expression, Shen Loxi looked directly at Lin Shishun and said, "Lin Shishun, just 10 minutes ago, Lin Jianhua, the village party secretary of Lala village, and 139 households named Lin have signed a contract for demolition compensation, and promised to completely relocate within 3 to 7 days. Lala village." "Yeah." Faced with the shocking news revealed by Shen Loxi, Lin Shishun, who firmly believed that the other party was setting up a smokescreen, asked a question in apparent disbelief, then sat back in his chair and said, "Mr. Shen, the village party secretary and those people from the Lin family have nothing to do with me, Lin Shishun. I only care about the conditions for my demolition compensation. A school district house of 120 square meters in the city, a commercial house of 150 square meters in a prosperous area of the city, 500,000 in cash, and the supply of sand and gravel for the development of the entire Lala village. These are the conditions that allow me to put my fingerprints on the demolition compensation contract. Lin Shishun, do you know how many cubic meters of sand and gravel are needed for the development of the entire Lala village phase 5? Do you know the total price of these sand and gravel?" Lin Shishun confidently stated the negotiation requirements, which completely angered Shen Loxi. She suddenly threw the contract on the table, and then asked loudly in anger, "Don't be angry, leave it to me. The drastic fluctuations of emotions will cause abnormal activity of the spirit, which will cause the soul-devouring goo to obtain more energy for growth and not use tomorrow's removal plan." So, reaching out and pressing Shen Loxi's fragrant shoulders, Zhang Fenjai gently instructed. "Humph." After giving Lin Shishun a cold snort of dissatisfaction, Shen Loxi took a few steps back. Sitting opposite Lin Shishun, Zhang Fenjai asked with a doubtful tone, "Lin Shishun, whether it is 500,000 in cash or wanting to make money through the supply of sand and gravel, I can understand all the requests you put forward. But what puzzles me is that what is the use of having a school district house in the city? You don't have any children yourself." The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 85. Just as Zhang Fenjai finished questioning, a look of panic suddenly flashed in Xiangmei's eyes when she returned to the back room. "Who said I don't have children?" Lin Shishun stood up suddenly, took out a thick photo album from the back room, threw it in front of Zhang Fenjai, and said with a smile, "I have a 6-year-old girl and a 2.5-year-old boy, which makes them perfect for both children." "That's wrong." While flipping through the photo album and checking it out, Zhang Fenjai deliberately frowned and muttered to himself, "The palace of husband and wife is full of cracks, which means that your married life is not so harmonious. The palace of children is dim, which means that you should not have children before you are 40 years old. Is it possible that there is something wrong with the origins of the son and daughter named after you?" Shen Loxi and Sister Qing, who had fully experienced Zhang Fenjai's physiognomy techniques, suddenly looked at Lin Shishun in surprise, looking at the lush hair on his head, as if the original black hair had turned green. "Boy, shut up." Slandering that the two children were not his biological children was tantamount to indirectly slandering his wife's innocence. This made Lin Shishun, who had always doted on his wife, suddenly become furious and lashed out. If it weren't for the fact that Zhang Fenjai had killed more than 50 gangsters with his bare hands, he would have even wanted to directly punch the boy in front of him who talked nonsense, slandered his wife. As the saying goes, a daughter's appearance will follow her father's, and a son's appearance will follow his mother's. Not because of Lin Shishun's accusation, Zhang Fengjai kept silent. He took a photo of a little girl from the album, pointed at her eyebrows and said, "Uncle, your eyebrows are sparse and dark, giving you a delicate and calm look, while this little girl's eyebrows are thick and dark, giving you an arrogant and awe-inspiring look." Having said this, Zhang Fengjai thought for a moment, then pulled out another photo from the album and said with a slight hesitation, "According to my observation, this little girl's appearance and temperament are very similar to the person in the photo." After seeing the two photos held by Zhang Fengjai, two people with exactly the same eyebrows, and nearly 80% similar appearance to each other, Lin Shishun also had a look of disbelief in his eyes. Shen Loxi, who was full of curiosity, quickly grabbed two photos, observed them carefully, and discussed them loudly with Sister Cheng. It really looks like, it looks so similar. Although the two people in the photo are more than 50 years apart, from their eyebrows to their eyes, from their foreheads to their mouths, they are all very similar, which made Shen Loxi couldn't help but sigh. "Mr. Shen, isn't this person Lin Jianhai, the village party secretary of Lala village?" Pointing to the second photo that Zhang Fengjai had just pulled out, Sister Ching shouted with a look of shock in her eyes. Bang! Just as Sister Ching's shouting ended, the sound of a glass breaking when it fell to the ground suddenly came from the back room. The sound of the cup breaking was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Lin Shishun turned around and ran straight to the back room while his face turned as pale as paper. Immediately afterwards, sounds of questioning, arguing and fighting came from the back room. Well, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sigh when he heard the quarreling and fighting coming from the back room. Originally, with his sharp-tongued character, he would never have used such an insidious method to deal with Lin Shishun. After all, two young children are innocent and they should not bear the punishment of their parents' mistakes. But who allowed the nine-headed monster in the land of vengeance to arouse his anger, and who allowed Lin Shishun to survive and hit the muzzle of the gun? Zhang Fengjai, are you telling the truth? Pointing to Lin Jianhai, who was almost 60 years old, and the little girl who was only 6 years old in the photo, Shen Loxi obviously found it difficult to accept such a violation of ethics. After all, Lin Jianhai is Lin Shishun's biological uncle, the biological brother of Lin Shishun's father. The two people have the deepest blood relationship. Well. After closing the thick photo album, Zhang Fengjai sighed softly and said, "Mr. Shen, you are from the city. You don't know the power and influence of the village party secretary in a village, let alone what kind of evil things a person who is accustomed to lawlessness can do." Although Zhang Fengjai did not directly confirm the relationship between Lin Jianhai and the girl, he confirmed it from the aspects of power and humanity. This shocked Shen Loxi, and at the same time, she finally understood why the country had to severely crack down on bullies in recent years, and why policies were geared towards poor rural areas. After arguing and fighting for more than 10 minutes, Lin Shishun walked out of the back room with a slightly embarrassed expression and an ashen complexion. Then, he slapped the 5 pieces of paper recording the secrets of Lin Jianhai and the Lin family's descendants on the table, and then said to Shen Loxi through gritted teeth, "Mr. Shen, you can let me sign and post, but you must send Lin Jianhai to prison so that he can get the punishment he deserves." Zhang Fengjai took the paper away from Lin Shishun's palm and handed it to Shen Loxi. After a quick glance at the contents recorded on the paper, Shen Loxi assured Lin Shishun with a frosty face, "Lin Shishun, not only will I send Lin Jianhai to prison, but I will also let him completely penetrate the prison." Contract. After receiving Shen Loxi's guarantee, Lin Shishun ordered to Sister Cheng, "Give." After hearing Lin Shishun's instructions, King Yi quickly handed the prepared contract to him. Without even looking at the contents of the contract, Lin Shishun wrote his name and pressed his handprint on the place where he signed. His whole spirit seemed to be drained away in an instant, and he fell directly on the chair. Uncle, all the sins have nothing to do with those two children. Even if you don't take care of them in the future, I hope you don't hurt them, otherwise, I will make you want to live but not to die. A person who has lost all hope, under the influence of despair, may do anything. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai must speak out the ugly words in advance to prevent Lin Shishun from doing things that hurt the world and avoid being condemned by his conscience while being involved in unclear cause and effect relationships. I'm not as cruel as you think, I just hope I never see them again. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's naked threat, Lin Shishun, who barely cheered up, waved his hand to indicate. As the saying goes, you can know a person's face but not his heart. When emotions change drastically, the whole person's face will change. Therefore, when he was unable to confirm whether Lin Shishun's guarantee would work, Zhang Fengjai decided to take precautions in advance with his own means. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 86. Auntie in the back room, please come out. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's greeting, Xiangmei quickly dressed up and then walked out of the back room with her head lowered. Although his face was covered with thick foundation, it was difficult to hide the bruises and swelling after being beaten. This was enough to prove how ruthless Lin Shishun was, who was deeply disappointed. However, facing the beaten Xiangmei, Shen Loxi, and Sister Qing, who were also women, not only did not show the slightest sympathy, but instead did not hide the disgust in their eyes. Without paying too much attention to the scars on Xiangmei's face, Zhang Fengjai took out the two remaining talismans from his sleeves and gave instructions to Lin Shishun and Xiangmei with an indifferent expression. Uncle, Aunt, please give me 2 pieces of hair each. Although they didn't know why Zhang Fengjai asked for the hair, both Xiangmei and Lin Shishun obediently pulled off 2 black hairs and handed them to Zhang Fengjai. Xiangmei's long black hair was entangled with Lin Shishun's short, slightly yellow hair, and then wrapped in talisman paper. Immediately afterwards, he began to make hand seals and cast spells on the talisman paper while chanting mantras. The Taoist ancestors of the Sanking dynasty show their magical powers, and the golden armored thunder god responds to the mortal world. The Confucianism and Mencius Confucianism protects the way of heaven, and the infinite swordsmanship determines the universe. As the spell ended, Zhang Fengjai suddenly stamped his right foot on the ground and shouted loudly. Condensation. Following Zhang Fengjai's loud shout, the sword seals pinched out with his fingers were printed directly on the 2 talisman papers wrapped around his hair. Then, a short sword that was about 1.5 inches long, emitting a faint golden light, gradually appeared on the blank talisman paper. Whether it was the accurate physiognomy just now or the weird spell he was casting now, the methods Zhang Fengjai displayed made Lin Shishun feel endless fear, and at the same time, he completely extinguished the idea of revenge on his son and daughter. After the golden dagger was completely hidden into the talisman paper, Zhang Fengjai breathed a long sigh of relief, handed the 2 talisman papers into Xiangmei's hands, and then gave a solemn warning. Auntie, wrap the talisman in a sachet and wear it around the necks of your children. This will protect them from any injuries or accidental injuries before they reach adulthood. Thank you, Immortal, thank you, Immortal. Xiangmei, who was relatively ignorant, now regarded Zhang Fengjai as one of those great immortals who danced around and caught imps, and quickly knelt down and kowtowed in thanks. Well. After sighing softly, Zhang Fengjai reached out to help Xiangmei, who was kneeling and kowtow, and then gave serious instructions. Although the rapid development of the times has caused more and more people to advocate power and money, and regard chastity and dignity as dirt, the etiquette, justice, and integrity left by our ancestors are still the foundation for maintaining secular ethics. Auntie, no matter whether your marriage to uncle breaks down or not, and no matter how much you long to be conquered in your heart, I hope you will think about your identity as a wife and mother before doing something that goes against secular ethics. Think about your husband who loves you and your children who respect and love you. Daxian, no matter whether Xiangmei and the leader can continue to be together, I swear to God that from now on I will behave as a human being and do things honestly, and I will never do anything shameful that would make people poke their spines in the back. Thing. If I violate my oath, I will be struck by thunder and die badly. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's sincere instructions, Xiangmei quickly raised her right hand and swore. The more ignorant a person is, the more they are in awe of the sky and the gods, and the less they dare to violate the oath they have sworn. Therefore, facing Xiangmei's oath, while Zhang Fenjai felt very satisfied, he also began to worry about her future life. After all, what Xiangmei did to Lin Shishun was not just a cuckold, but also made him work hard to raise 2 children for others. No matter how open-minded Lin Shishun was, he would certainly not be able to bear such heart-wrenching shame and humiliation. Then, the divorce of the 2 people is certain, and the ending of Xiangmei leaving home with her 2 children will not change. At the same time, although the unruly Xiangmei bears an important responsibility for the suffering that the 2 children are about to suffer, she also has to bear a certain responsibility for breaking the secret. Thinking of this, Zhang Fenjai turned to Shen Loxi and asked, "Mr. Shen, I remember you once said that if the demolition work of Lala village can be successfully completed, not only will I play a very important role, but I will also be rewarded by the group, right?" "That's right," Shen Loxi, who vaguely guessed what Zhang Fenjai wanted to do, nodded and confirmed. "Mr. Shen, I want an 80 square meter school district house in the city and a cash reward of 200,000 yuan. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's request for reward, Sister Qing was surprised that he dared to open his mouth. She was even more shocked by Shen Loxi's attitude. "No problem." Although an 80 square meter school district house was worth more than 1 million yuan, which was far more than 10 times the group's reward limit, Shen Loxi nodded in agreement without hesitation in the face of Zhang Fenjai's request. The house was transferred directly to her name, and all the cash of 200,000 yuan was given to her. Shen Loxi's attitude of readily agreeing was also beyond Zhang Fenjai's expectations. It also made him unable to help but want to test the other party further to determine the price of clearing the soul-eating goo tomorrow. "Since the house and money are awarded to you by the group, what you do with them is your own business." Faced with Zhang Fenjai's further probing, Shen Loxi replied even more boldly. "Mr. Shen, thank you." Shen Loxi's generosity and trust made Zhang Fenjai bow to thank her, and for the first time, he also had a good impression of her. Next to the experimental middle school, there is a school district house belonging to the group, with an area of less than 90 square meters. Let Sister Qing take her to handle the transfer procedures tomorrow. Although Shen Loxi didn't know that her generosity and trust had won the other party's favor, and her status was about to catch up with Sulitzi, who had saved her life, but she felt that her efforts were worth it to make the arrogant Zhang Fenjai bow to thank her sincerely for the first time. "Thank you, Master, thank you, Mr. Shen." Even if she left the house with 2 children, with a school district house and 200,000 in cash, she and her mother would not have to worry about their livelihood and studies for a long time. This made Xiangmei, who was filled with endless emotion in her heart, really didn't know what to say, and could only continue to kneel down and kowtow to thank her. This time, before Zhang Fenjai could reach out to help her, Shen Loxi walked directly to Xiangmei, helped her up, and solemnly warned her. "Xiangmei, Zhang Fenjai's gift just now was only based on humanitarian concern, and it can only solve the urgent need for the time being. If you want to have no worries about food and clothing in the future, and don't want the 2 children to suffer, then you must hold the biological father of the children responsible and let him be responsible for your future." The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 87. Hold the biological father of the child accountable. When Xiangmei heard Shen Loxi's suggestion, or rather her request, her face turned pale, her body trembled slightly and she took 3 steps back, with a look of fear in her eyes. Shen Loxi, who mistakenly thought that Xiangmei was afraid of Lin Jianhai's power, would show such fear and terror, hurried forward to hold her hands and encouraged her. "Sister Xiangmei, don't be afraid and terrified. We live in a society with a sound legal system, and no one can be above the Constitution. If you don't have the confidence and courage to face the biological father of the child, then our group will provide free legal aid, and will definitely help you win the lawsuit and get enough compensation." According to the information provided by Lin Shishun just now, combined with the information they collected in advance, Lin Jianhai's career as a village party secretary for 23 years has accumulated amazing wealth. Apart from anything else, as long as Lin Jianhai is willing to give out 1% of his wealth, it will be enough for Xiangmei and her 2 children to live a wealthy life without worries about food and clothing. No need. Faced with Shen Loxi's enthusiastic encouragement and help, Xiangmei unexpectedly shook her head and refused immediately. Xiangmei's cowardice made Shen Loxi feel sorry for her misfortune. When she couldn't help but want to continue to encourage her, Zhang Fengjai suddenly reached out and pressed her shoulders, shaking his head to indicate that she didn't need to continue to encourage and persuade. "Auntie, let Sister Qing take you to handle the settlement procedures for the school district house tomorrow." After leaving his last thoughts, Zhang Fengjai directly pulled Shen Loxi's arm and took her away from Lin Shishun's house. "Zhang Fengjai, why don't you let me use legal means to help Xiangmei and the 2 children get the compensation they deserve?" Shen Loxi, who was slightly dissatisfied, shook off Zhang Fengjai's broad and powerful palm with force, and questioned indignantly. Because the biological father of the 2 children is not the same person, facing Shen Loxi's questioning, Zhang Fengjai shrugged his shoulders and replied with a depressed face. When Shen Loxi proposed to investigate the biological father of the child, Xiangmei's unusual reaction immediately aroused his suspicion. Therefore, through the photo album on the table, a family photo of all the Lin family members, he knew that the 2 children were not only half-siblings, but also knew who the biological father of the little boy was through the clearer faces of the people in the photo. Zhang Fengjai, who are the biological fathers of the 2 children. After hearing the shocking secret revealed by Zhang Fengjai, Shen Loxi felt unbelievable and hurriedly held his arm and asked, "Alas." In response, Zhang Fengjai shook his hand gently and shook his head and sighed, then walked towards Zhang Yiting's home. It was precisely because he knew who the biological father of the little boy was that he could not tell Shen Loxi the specific truth. Because if the secret of the biological father of the little boy was leaked, it would not only destroy the future growth and happiness of the 2 children, but also might force Xiangmei, who had lost all her face, to make a choice that she would regret for the rest of her life. If Xiangmei really took the last step, the causal relationship that could not be escaped would cause him great trouble. Zhang Fengjai refused to reveal the origin of the biological father of the 2 children, which made Shen Loxi very dissatisfied, and she could not help but speculate. Through the nearly 80% similar appearance, it can be basically determined that the biological father of the little girl is Lin Jianhai. Then, who is the biological father of the little boy? If it was Lin Shishun, Xiangmei would have said it when she was beaten if she still wanted to save their marriage. Since it is not the child of Lin Jianhai and Lin Shishun, and Xiangmei is afraid to pursue it, it must be a person that even Lin Jianhai can't do anything about. In Lala village, among the younger generations of the Lin family, the only person who can make Lin Jianhai helpless seems to be his most doted and respected only grandson Lin Jing's. Thinking of Lin Jing's, he was just a young man who had just retired from the army 3 years ago, and he was at the age of impulsiveness. Thinking of Xiangmei's charming figure, as well as her pitiful charm and obedience, Shen Loxi guessed who the boy's biological father was, and finally understood why Zhang Fengjai did not allow her to provide legal aid to help Xiangmei fight the lawsuit, and why he refused to reveal who the biological father of the child was. After all, the scandal involving 3 generations of ethics is enough to ruin the future lives of Xiangmei and her 2 children. There must be something hateful about pitiful people. Turning his head and looking at the red door that was closed again, Shen Loxi was completely disappointed with Xiangmei. After leaving a famous saying that has been passed down through the ages, he turned around and quickened his pace to catch up with Zhang Fengjai. The most difficult Lin Jianhai and Lin Shishun have been successfully taken down, which means that the work of compensation for the demolition of Lala village has been successfully completed. In particular, the compensation details posted at noon allowed the vast majority of villagers to accept it calmly, and they also began to contact new residences so that they could seize the time to leave the home where they have lived for a lifetime. The subsequent demolition and planning no longer required the personal presence of the general manager Shen Loxi, so after having lunch at Zhang Yi's house, Wang Denmei drove a luxury car to take Zhang Fengjai and Shen Loxi away from Luokunlu. However, just as they drove to the entrance of the village, they learned from the new project supervisor that just an hour ago, Lin Shishun rushed into Lin Jianhai's house with a kitchen knife, not only severely injured Lin Jianhai, but also completely cut off Lin Jing's roots. It's what you deserve. After hearing about the fate of Lin Jianhai and Lin Jing's, Shen Loxi, who knew the specific truth, couldn't help but cheer. In response, Zhang Fengjai just sighed lightly, turned his head and looked at Daguan village at the west end of the village, with a terrifying cold light in his eyes. In the underground parking lot of Xintang building, Shen Loxi rushed out of the car quickly, grabbed Zhang Fengjai's arm and asked. Zhang Fengjai, is what Denmei said just now true? Will Lin Dayuan, the old fox, really come to you with 20 million cash to apologize? Originally, according to Shen Loxi's plan, she would go directly back to the villa in Guanghe Garden and take a good shower, but after hearing the reason why Zhang Fengjai had to return to the company, she suddenly became interested and had to come together. In this regard, whether it was Zhang Fengjai as a bodyguard or Wang Denmei as a good sister and driver, there was no way to object or refuse. Suddenly stopping the pace forward, Zhang Fengjai said confidently. As long as that old fellow Lin Dayuan doesn't want to die and doesn't want to see the Lin family decline from now on, then he will definitely come and apologize with 20 million in cash. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 88. After receiving Zhang Fengjai's confident answer, Shen Loxi immediately said to herself excitedly. No, I have to ask someone to prepare a high-definition camera to record the scene of Lin Dayuan apologizing, and then send it to my father to watch, so that he can also see the shameful appearance of that old fox. In response, Zhang Fengjai chose to default without stopping. After all, the humiliation given by Lin Chilan when she broke off the engagement, and the punishment that should be suffered for cheating, all need to be borne by Lin Dayuan, the culprit who took the initiative to propose the engagement. After returning to the office area of Yongsheng Group through the elevator, Zhang Fengjai first led the little black dog to Sulizi's office. Because in order to obtain the blessing of the little black dog when it is promoted to a spirit beast, it is necessary to obtain the recognition and loyalty of the little black dog, which requires a long time of getting along and accompanying one person and one dog. Fortunately, knowing that she needs to wait for Lin Dayuan and Lin Chilan to arrive in the afternoon, Sulizi turned down the banquets of several important customers and stayed in the office waiting. Sister Litzi. After pushing open the door of the office, Zhang Fengjai saw Sulizi buried in a pile of documents. After a look of heartache flashed in his eyes, he walked directly to her side. While greeting softly, he helped her massage her temples on both sides to relieve her physical fatigue. Yezi, why did you come back early? As the old saying goes, one day without seeing you is like 3 autumns. In the past, Sulizi thought that this was just the hypocrisy of the ancients. How could the feeling of missing be so deep and urgent? Now, after being separated from Zhang Fengjai for a day, she can really experience what it means to miss someone as if you have been away for 3 autumns. If it weren't for Zhang Fengjai massaging her temples, Sulitsi would have stood up and hugged him in her arms. The work of demolition compensation has been successfully completed, and Mr. Shen decided to come back early. How is it, can you adapt to the work of bodyguard? Didn't Shen Loxi deliberately make things difficult for you? Holding Zhang Fenjai's hands that were being massaged, Sulitsi looked up at his eyes and asked with concern. Not bad. Unable to adapt to Sulitsi's fiery gaze for the time being, Zhang Fenjai gently broke free of her hands and walked towards the sofa while explaining. Besides her childish temper, Ms. Shen is very easy to get along with. That's fine. Knowing that Zhang Fenjai, a pure virgin, was thin-skinned and could not accept overly enthusiastic actions, Shen Loxi did not care that he avoided her fiery gaze, but stood up and walked to the refrigerator that only department managers could enjoy, took out a bottle of drink and threw it to him. Huh. When throwing the drink to Zhang Fenjai, Sulitsi immediately saw the little black dog crawling at his feet, and bent over to greet him with joy in her eyes. Little dog, come to your sister. Looking up at Zhang Fenjai, the little black dog got up and slowly walked to Sulitsi after getting his nod of agreement. Yezi, where did you find this little black dog? As she reached out to pick up the little black dog, she couldn't help but ask because of a feeling of love that emerged in her heart. Lala Village, bought it from a guy who was torturing it for 50 yuan. Zhang Fenjai answered truthfully. Yezi, can you give me the little black dog? Hearing Zhang Fenjai say that he bought it with money, Sulitsi, who couldn't dispel her love in her heart, asked eagerly. Sister Litsi, this is the gift I was going to give you. Zhang Fenjai replied with a smile, and waved to the little black dog crawling on Sulitsi. Then, the little black dog broke free from Sulitsi's arms with clever strength and rushed directly to his feet. However, I have to let it do something very important tomorrow afternoon, so I can't give it to you officially tomorrow night. Okay. Adding the word important in front of the matter let Sulitsi know that Zhang Fenjai was unwilling to explain the content of the matter too much. So, she was very tactful and didn't ask any more questions. She just nodded in agreement and began to arrange the future life of the little black dog to herself. We need to build a doghouse in the living room, and buy high-quality dog food and bathing supplies. Signaling the little black dog to continue to follow Sulitsi, Zhang Fenjai got up and left the office, found a chair in the office area, and then placed the chair at the front desk, quietly waiting for Lin Dayuan and Lin Chilan to arrive. After having lunch at Zhang Yiding's house, he chatted with Jiang's mother for more than an hour, and then listened to the gossip of the project supervisor at the entrance of the village for more than half an hour. When he returned to Xintang building, it was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was less than half an hour before the agreed time of 3/4 of the afternoon with Lin Dayuan. In less than half an hour, he still needed to adjust his state so that he could eliminate the impending disaster for Lin Dayuan. So, he simply sat at the front desk of the group and waited while adjusting his state. Time passed by minute. Although the elevator on the floor where Yongsheng Group was located was often opened, Lin Dayuan and Lin Chilan who were waiting never appeared. Yezi, Lin Dayuan and Lin Chilan probably won't come. Since receiving Zhang Fenjai's call yesterday, Sulitsi, who was afraid of being exposed, arranged 2 subordinates from the sales department to guard the front desk of the first floor lobby and the parking lot in the front yard after lunch. At this time, after talking to the subordinates guarding the front yard, the several cars belonging to the Lin family still did not appear. At this moment, there was less than a minute left before 3:45 p.m. Even if Lin Dayuan and Lin Chilan showed up at last, it would have exceeded the time limit given by Zhang Fenjai. Therefore, Sulitsi, who had hung up the phone, could not help but whisper a reminder in his ear. Ignoring Sulitsi's reminder, Zhang Fenjai, who had been keeping his eyes closed, silently calculated the time. When the time reached 3:45 p.m., Zhang Fenjai, whose face suddenly became gloomy, suddenly opened his eyes. Then, he ignored Sulitsi, Shen Loxi and Wang Denmei who were guarding behind him, and returned to the office area with a chair. Then, Ignoring the gazes of dozens of staff members in the office area, he broke into the general manager's office. After looking at each other, Sulitsi, Shenloxi and Wang Denmei also hurried to the office, and then saw Zhang Fengjai standing in front of the desk, staring at the 3 copper coins placed on the table. Close the door. Without turning back, Zhang Fengjai took out the last 3 pieces of talisman paper from his sleeve, then picked up a brush from Shen Loxi's desk and wrote down the birth dates of Lin Dayuan and Lin Chalan on 2 pieces of talisman paper. Then, he turned his head and told the little black dog crawling in Sulitsi's arms. Come here. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 89. When the little black dog rushed to the desk, Zhang Fengjai used the finger knife to cut the skin of its 4 limbs and squeezed out 3 drops of blood with a faint fishy smell. Then, he used the blood of the little black dog as ink to draw a complex spell that made people feel dizzy on the 3rd blank talisman paper. Then, each talisman paper wrapped a copper coin and placed it on the desk in the shape of a Chinese character. Back off. When Zhang Fengjai signaled the little black dog squatting at his feet to retreat to Sulitsi, he also took a step back and mobilized the spiritual power in his dantian to penetrate his 10 fingers. Then, the 10 fingers of his left and right hands began to condense dim marks at a dazzling speed. When the dim marks were imprinted on the talisman paper, the 3 talisman papers quietly placed on the desk began to tremble slightly. This also made Sulitsi, Shenloxi and Wang Denmei, who were standing at the door of the office, hold their breath and stare at the 3 talisman papers wrapped with copper coins on the desk. After all, they had all witnessed the magic of Zhang Fengjai's Taoist magic. As more and more dim marks were printed on the talisman paper, the trembling talisman paper suddenly stood up, and then it danced like little people. Burn. The dazzling hand gestures of making seals suddenly stopped, and Zhang Fengjai shouted at the 3 dancing talisman papers. Along with Zhang Fengjai's shout, the 3 talisman papers that did not stop dancing suddenly burned automatically, and the burning flames gradually condensed into 3 big characters: human, immortal, and ghost. Pop. The 10 fingers that condensed the marks quickly separated, and the left and right hands suddenly slapped together, and then slowly spread out, while Zhang Fengjai chanted a spell softly. Immortal is on top, ghost is on the bottom, and the word human occupies the middle. Along with the sound of the spell, the talisman paper and copper coins burning the word immortal directly flew 1 meter into the air, and the talisman paper and copper coins burning the word human flew half a meter into the air. The talisman paper and copper coins burning the word ghost stayed in place and continued to dance. Xian Tong, Gaimi, Renhuijing. Looking at the Xian character paper and copper coins floating in front of him, and the ghost character paper and copper coins dancing on the table, Zhang Fengjai took a deep breath and suddenly stretched out his left and right hands. Among them, the index finger of his right hand directly smashed the Xian character paper and copper coins, and the palm of his left hand directly smashed the ghost character paper and copper coins. The Xian character paper and copper coins smashed by the fingers turned into a white gas, and then transformed into a 7-inch white snake, which quickly pounced on the human character paper. The ghost character paper and copper coins smashed by the palm turned into a black gas, and then transformed into a 7-inch black snake, which quickly rushed towards the human character copper coins. Bang! Bang! After the white snake swallowed the burning talisman paper and the black snake swallowed the burning copper coins, a slight sound came from the bodies of the 2 snakes. Then, the snake bodies suddenly exploded, forming a black and a white gas. Then, the black and white gases intertwined and merged with each other, eventually forming a mirror of the yin-yang Tai Chi diagram. Among them, the picture displayed on the white mirror was Shen Loxi's office. In the picture, there were not only sofas, computers, and desks, but also Sulitsi, Shen Loxi and Wang Denmei standing at the door of the office. This also made the three people who also saw the picture in the white mirror look extremely shocked. Because the mirror was placed flat at this time, it could only reflect the picture of the office roof under normal circumstances, not the overall layout of the whole room. Fortunately, it was not the first time for them to see such a magical Taoism, so they quickly calmed down from the shock. Then, their eyes quickly turned to the black mirror. But no picture appeared in the pitch black mirror. However, the black mirror without any picture in the eyes of Sulitzi and others gradually emerged as a room with simple and elegant decoration in the eyes of Zhang Fengjai. In the room, Lin Qilan and an old man with silver hair gradually knelt on the ground respectfully. In front of the two people, there stood a white-haired old man in his 60s wearing a light grey Taoist robe, holding a plum blossom sword, and stepping on the Big Dipper formation. Just as Zhang Fengjai cast his eyes on the grey-robed old man, the grey-robed old man who was performing Taoist magic suddenly looked up at the black mirror as if he had a telepathic feeling, and shouted fiercely. Who dares to secretly spy on this immortal casting a spell? When Zhang Fengjai heard the grey-robed old man call himself an immortal, he almost laughed out loud. Even the third grandfather who was a Taoist master and the 5 special beings in the depths of Rat Mountain did not dare to easily touch the word immortal. A little cultivator at the 3rd level of Qi condensation dared to call himself an immortal, which was enough to show how arrogant and conceited the other party was. However, the other party's subsequent actions not only further demonstrated his arrogance, but also further proved his ignorance and stupidity. See how I can break the magic weapon you secretly spy on, and then extract your 3 souls and 7 spirits. After shouting, the feeling of being secretly spied on did not disappear at all, which made the grey-robed old man who was used to being high and mighty suddenly furious. The right foot that stepped on the Tianji star point suddenly took a step forward, and the plum blossom sword in his hand slashed out a dim starlight that looked like a plum blossom. Humph! Seeing the starlight slashing directly at the black mirror, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sneer, and his right hand quickly reached into the black mirror like lightning. Then, a hand appeared out of thin air in the room where the grey-robed old man was, smashing the starlight directly, and continued to slap the grey-robed old man at lightning speed. Damn it! Seeing the hand slapping quickly, the grey-robed old man cursed with a gloomy face, chanting a spell softly, and quickly stepped out of the Big Dipper formation with his feet, and then cooperated with the plum blossom sword in his hand to quickly condense a 6-pointed starlight sword light on the tip of the sword. The dragon and tiger patriarch shows his magical power, and the fuchsing sword energy slashes the demons. Slash. Then, the grey-robed old man swung the plum blossom sword violently, and the starlight sword light on the tip of the sword slashed directly at the hand that was about to hit his head. Pa! Accompanied by a crisp sound, the starlight sword light that the grey-robed old man exerted with all his strength was directly smashed by the lightning-fast hand. Then, the hand, whose offensive was not reduced at all, continued to slap the grey-robed old man's head. Even the star sword light that was powerful enough to break the stone tablet could be easily shattered. The grey-robed old man did not believe that his fragile head could withstand the power of the palm. So, just when the palm just touched his scalp, he rolled over like a donkey, which made him narrowly avoid the fatal attack. Looking up at the palm that appeared out of thin air, Lin Qilan and the old man with silver hair showed disbelief in their eyes at the same time. Because the scene in front of them was exactly the scene that would only appear in movies, TV series, and online novels, which completely subverted their cognition of the real world. And when they saw that the grey-robed immortal who was hired at a high price of tens of millions was easily defeated by the palm, a bad feeling suddenly emerged in their hearts. Especially Lin Qilan, because she found that the palm that appeared out of thin air was somewhat familiar, very much like the palm of the person who had been severely humiliated by her, but threatened in turn. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 90. Senior, it was this junior who rushed into you blindly. I hope you can spare this junior's life for the sake of Longhu Mountain. After using a relatively embarrassing move to avoid the fatal blow, the old man in grey robe still refused to let go of him when he saw the palm appearing out of thin air. He quickly stepped on the Big Dipper array to dodge, and at the same time began to plead bitterly. After hearing that the grey-robed old man turned out to be a monk from Longhu Mountain, his rapidly pursuing palm suddenly stopped. Immediately afterwards, a slightly childish voice sounded throughout the room. Since you are a monk from Longhu Mountain, you must be carrying top-notch talismans and monster blood. After hearing the sudden sound in the room, the expressions of the grey-robed old man and Lin Chalan couldn't help but change. The reason why the grey-robed old man's expression changed was because he heard that voice and was interested in the few talisman papers and a few drops of monster blood on his body. The reason why Lin Chalan's expression changed was that she had already heard who the owner of the voice was. "Grandpa, the voice that just appeared out of thin air is the person you once decided to marry me to, Zhang Fenjai from the Zhang family in Shushan." After hearing Lin Chalan's reminder, Lin Dayuan's face instantly turned as pale as a blank sheet of paper, and there was a look of fear in his eyes. Because he suddenly thought of the two terrifying strong men in Mouse Mountain, the butcher and the ghost hand. If I go back to my senior, I am just a registered disciple of Longhu Mountain. How could I have precious top-notch talismans and the blood of monsters? The few top-notch talismans and the blood of monsters that were left on his body were obtained by working as cattle and horses for the inner disciples. They were the foundation for his future foothold in the secular world. How could he give them away so easily? Therefore, the old man in grey robe immediately lowered his status and began to cry about poverty. As far as I know, there are not 1,000 registered disciples in Longhu Mountain, but 700 or 800. I guess they will not care about the loss of one registered disciple. Through the black mirror in front of him, how could Zhang Fenjai not be able to see through the mind of the old man in grey robe? Therefore, he used the introduction he had heard from Third Grandpa about Longhu Mountain to start threatening the other party. "Senior, no. Not to mention one registered disciple who was not taken seriously, even if 10 or 8 registered disciples were lost in one go, the headmaster and elders of Longsu Mountain would not care at all. The reason is just as the voice mentioned just now. There are many registered disciples in Longhu Mountain, so many that many elders of the sect have never remembered them." Afraid of the palm floating in the air continuing to pursue, the old man in grey robe shouted to stop him, and at the same time took out 2 pieces of dark yellow talisman paper and a porcelain bottle the size of a thumb from his sleeves, and then raised it over said the one above the head. "Senior, these are the only 2 blank talisman papers left in this junior's body, and a drop of the blood of the blue tiger monster. Not enough. As long as there is no immortality that breaks away from the mortal body, there is no way to escape from the calculation of fate." Although he could not tell the fate of the old man in grey robe with his current physiognomy, he could tell that the other person was lying through the constant changes in his facial physiognomy, so he scolded him in a gloomy tone. "Senior, even if you kill this junior, I will still bring out more talismans and monster blood." The old man in grey robe, who was suddenly nervous, immediately pretended to be unable to do what he wanted. "If that's the case, then Liang, I will kill you directly and then examine your body." Zhang Fenjai, who didn't believe the other party's lies at all, directly opened his palm and grabbed the old man in green robe. 5 blank talisman papers, 4 drops of blood essence from blue tiger and green snake, this is really all this junior's possessions. Although the voice that appeared out of thin air seemed very childish, it was very cunning in doing things. This made the old man in grey robe feel desperate. At the same time, he also took out 2/3 of the talisman and the blood of the monster in his collection, hoping to make the other party feel satisfied. The waving palm suddenly stopped, and then quickly snatched the talisman and porcelain bottle in the grey-robed old man's raised hands. Zhang Fenjai scolded. "You have 1 hour to get out of Ningji City. Otherwise, I don't mind sending you to meet the masters at Longhu Mountain in advance." "Thank you, Senior, for not killing. Thank you, Senior, for not killing. After hearing the forgiveness expressed in Zhang Fenjai's scolding, the grey-robed old man quickly thanked and promised. Junior, get out of Ningji City and Dongshan Province immediately. Master Su Xian, you can't leave. When he heard that the old man in grey robe was planning to leave, Lin Deyuan quickly stood up to persuade him to stay. Because Taoist Wuxin from Shushan once told him a fortune telling that he would be killed by a bloody disaster on the first day of autumn this year. It was precisely because of Taoist Wu Xian's hexagram at that time that he privately decided to betroth his granddaughter Lin Qilan to Zhang Fenjai in exchange for Taoist Wu Xian's help. However, as the Lin family's business has grown in recent years and they have come into contact with more and more powerful people and strange people, Lin Deyuan has become more and more contemptuous of Taoist Wu Xian's awe. Especially when Chen Yuanqiang, the sole heir of the Kowloon group, began to pursue Lin Qilan crazily, Lin Deyuan, who took a fancy to the Kowloon group's strong financial resources and extensive connections, not only secretly fueled the flames, but also tried his best to find strange people who could resolve the bloody disaster. And the old man in grey robe with an immortal spirit in front of him was the immortal he spent more than 10 million to invite to resolve the bloody disaster. Now, Lin Qilan's withdrawal of the engagement and his disregard of the other party's warnings have completely broken with the Shushan Zhang family. The other party will definitely not help him resolve the bloody disaster. If the Su Xianren, who was invited at a huge cost, also leaves, then Lin Deyuan and the more than a dozen people in the Lin family may not survive the beginning of autumn before midnight. After all, the Su Xianren in front of him had also read the fortune for him and got the same seal as Taoist Wuxin. Mr. Lin, you don't let Su leave. Do you want me to die in your Lin family villa today? Whether it is 5 top-notch talisman papers or 4 drops of blood from the upgraded monster, the total value is almost 100 million. Of course, if it is in a special environment and occasion, the value of talisman paper and monster blood will definitely be higher. Now, the talisman paper and monster blood worth nearly 100 million have been blackmailed by Lin Deyuan's enemies, which makes the grey-robed old man who has been bleeding all the time feel very angry. Therefore, after hearing Lin Deyuan's request to stay, he immediately shouted angrily. If it weren't for the fact that he had just promised to get out of Ningji City immediately, and if it weren't for the threat of the palm floating in the room, he would definitely teach Lin Deyuan a lesson and force him to make up for his losses. Although the grey-robed old man's strength was not very strong, he was also a cultivator who practiced Taoism. The momentum exuded in anger was not something that an ordinary old man like Lin Deyuan could bear. Therefore, under the grey-robed old man's shouting and glaring, Lin Deyuan directly spit out a mouthful of blood and stepped back 5 steps in succession. If Lin Qilan hadn't stood up and supported him in time, he would have hit the wooden shelf where the antiques were placed, and then been stabbed in the back by a sharp sword. After shouting angrily, the grey-robed old man didn't dare to stay too long, and quickened his pace to leave the room and leave the Lin family's villa.